Ever since I got my PS5, I've had to deal with the lack of storage. I just have way too many cultured and sophisticated games, it seems. But now I decided to rectify that problem by expanding the system's storage capacity. Upgrading storage is actually really easy to do, and thankfully it's also quite affordable on the PS5, especially compared to whatever the hell is going on with Microsoft's solution there with their proprietary connector of the Series X and S. As you may know, the PS5 only plays PS5 games if it's on the 825GB onboard storage or an M.2 NVMe SSD that you put in yourself. You can transfer PS5 games onto external USB devices, but you can't run them off of those locations. They just serve as storage. And that's precisely what I've been doing. I have an external mechanical drive and I've been transferring games around depending on what I want to play. But no more of that nonsense. I bought myself this 2TB Crucial SSD. Yay, Amazon Prime sale. Sony has specs on their website on what SSDs are supported. Just Google PS5 SSD and you'll find it near the top somewhere there. There's even info about adding a heatsink to an SSD, but if you're not technically minded, you don't have to worry about that sort of stuff. Just go to Amazon, type in SSD PS5, and you'll get a bunch of satisfactory candidates that advertise themselves as being PS5 compatible. Personally, I would avoid getting weird cheapo ones that have no track record of reliability. With storage, it's best to stick with the established brands. But hey, if you want to experiment, then feel free to try one out. I didn't do that, obviously. And just so you know, sizes anywhere from 250GB to 4TB works. The PlayStation 5 needs to be updated to a certain version for the SSD to be recognized, so before you do anything, make sure it's up to date. That's probably not an issue for most people, but if you have a system that hasn't been updated since about September 2021, then you'll have to do that first. Mine's used regularly, so everything's fine here. Let's install the SSD, obviously disconnect it and everything and put it on a table. It's pretty easy to do. If you build computers, then this is a walk in the park. And if you're a real OG who's, played around with Cyrix processors, 3DFX graphics cards, SCSI stuff, and, overclocking processors with jumpers and whatever, then the SSD will probably just install itself just by being in your presence. And if you're a total beginner, don't worry, it's really easy, and the chances of breaking something is that's super low. You only need a Phillips head screwdriver, not a massive chunky one, something that's a bit on the smaller end of the spectrum, but most likely whatever you have will work. A flathead screwdriver is a good idea if you need to remove the base, if you have one installed on your PS5, or you can just use a coin or something. Alright, time to open it up. Put the PS5 flat on the table with the PlayStation logo facing down. The optical drive side should be up and facing away from you. The back end with the connectors should be facing you with the power cable socket on the left side. You can push slightly up and towards the left with your right hand on the bottom right flappy thing, and together with the left hand on the top left, you can push the entire panel to the left. The SSD-sized cover is our next target. There's a screw that needs unscrewing. Once it's removed, you can see that it can accommodate various physical sizes of SSDs because there's all these little holes there. If yours is not the largest physical size, you want to remove the screw and that little support thing and put it into the right hole. It actually doesn't really matter what order you do things in. For example, I put the SSD in first, and then I just lifted it up a little bit to put the support piece in. And then, of course, I screwed everything into place. And don't tighten it down like a maniac. Just, you don't want to break anything. The metal cover can go back on now. I actually read an article where they did testing with SSD, with and without heatsinks, and also the cover off and on. Apparently, the SSD with the heatsink and the cover off ran the coolest. I thought that was interesting. I just put mine back on. I was like, whatever. After that, we can put back on the cover of the system. It just slides on the opposite way of how you took it off. Make sure everything clicks into place. Don't worry about giving it a light tap of hammer hand. Wiggle it around to see if it all clicked into place. Sometimes it doesn't work the first time and you just kind of have to work it in. Now it's time to hook it back up. Once you turn the PS5 on, it will let you know that it needs to format the SSD before use, and so let it do that. It'll also tell you how to change the default storage location in the settings, so I recommend doing that or whatever you prefer, I suppose. Obviously, that's your preference. Maybe you want to have the built-in storage as the default and then just transfer over what you want. I just set the SSD as being, when I say SSD, I mean the one we just installed. I like having that as the default. You can transfer games several different ways. In In the main menu, you can hit the Start/Option button and select Move Games and Apps. Then you can select what to move. If it's a game on the console, then you won't see the games that are on external drives. You'll have to select something that's on an external drive to see all of those games. Transferring between the console and M.2 SSD storage is very fast. Unfortunately, you don't see it at a glance where a game is installed. I mean, you can see if it's on external storage, but you can't see if it's on the M.2 SSD or the built-in one. But if you check out the information, it'll actually tell you at the bottom, so yeah. Another quirk I discovered is that PS5 games on external drives can only be copied to the SSD, not transferred, if you use the method I just told you about. But if you go to the Move Games and Apps thing through a PS4 game that's on the external drive, then you can select your PS5 games from the list as well, and it transfers just fine. Not sure why that is, but there you go. Whatever the case is, you'll figure it out. It's not really difficult. So yeah, in the end, 2TB is great for me. I can basically have everything on the M.2 SSD and still have tons of space to spare. That's both the PS4 and PS5 games that I have. And I'm really quite happy to have finally done this upgrade. No more worrying about running out of space and transferring stuff around. Anyway, I hope that was helpful or at least enjoyable. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video.